Sarah Martinez walked through the automatic doors of Jefferson Elementary School, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. To everyone around her, she was just another teacher arriving for another ordinary Tuesday morning. The security guard nodded at her with his usual smile, and she waved back, adjusting the stack of spelling tests in her arms. Nobody knew that just 5 years ago, those same hands had assembled explosive devices in the mountains of Afghanistan. Nobody knew that behind her gentle smile was a woman who had once held a sniper rifle steady for 8 hours straight in the Iraqi desert. "Morning, Sarah," called out Janet from the main office. "Ready for another fun day with the fourth graders?" Sarah laughed, the sound light and carefree. "Always ready for chaos," she replied, pushing her dark hair behind her ear. The small scar above her left eyebrow, barely visible under her makeup, was the only physical reminder of the shrapnel that had nearly taken her during a night raid in Mosul. As she walked down the familiar hallway lined with colorful student artwork, Sarah passed the trophy case. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, and for a split second, she saw herself differently. Not as Mrs. Martinez, the beloved teacher who organized bake sales and stayed late to help struggling students. Instead, she saw Petty Officer First Class Sarah Chun, the woman who had earned her trident pin after completing the most grueling military training known to mankind. The transformation had taken years to perfect. After 12 years of serving her country in the most elite Special Operations Unit, Sarah had walked away from everything she knew to build a completely different life. She had changed her last name from Chun to Martinez, moved 3 states away from anyone who might recognize her, and buried every trace of her military past. Her classroom was exactly what people expected from a 4th-grade teacher. Bright posters covered the walls, showing the alphabet, multiplication tables, and motivational quotes about believing in yourself. Her desk held a coffee mug that read, "World's Best Teacher," and a small succulent plant that she somehow managed to keep alive despite her historically terrible relationship with anything green. But if someone looked closely, they might notice things that seemed slightly out of place. The way her eyes automatically scanned every room she entered, noting exits and potential threats. How she never sat with her back to a door. The fact that she could calculate distances and wind speed without thinking about it. Skills that had once helped her make impossible shots in impossible conditions. 26-8 and 9-year-olds burst in her classroom at 8:15, their voices creating a cheerful chaos that Sarah had grown to love. There was Tommy, who struggled with reading but could build amazing things with blocks. Jessica, who asked a million questions about everything. Marcus, who was dealing with his parents' divorce and needed extra patience some days. Mrs. Martinez, called out Emma, practically bouncing in her seat. "My dad said women can't be soldiers, but I told him that's not true. Can you tell him he's wrong?" Sarah's breath caught for just a moment. She had spent years perfecting the art of deflecting these kinds of conversations, but Emma's earnest face made it harder than usual. "Well, Emma," she said carefully, "women serve in all branches of the military. They're very brave and do important work protecting our country." "See, I knew it," Emma declared triumphantly. "I want to be a soldier when I grow up. A really tough one who goes on secret missions." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. Here was this little girl, dreaming of doing exactly what Sarah had spent 12 years doing, while Sarah pretended it was just a distant possibility rather than her lived reality. The morning passed in its usual rhythm. Math lessons, reading time, and a science experiment involving baking soda volcanoes that got more chaotic than planned. Sarah moved through it all with practiced ease, but part of her mind was elsewhere, remembering other explosions. Real ones, dangerous ones. During lunch, she sat in the teacher's lounge with her colleagues, half listening to their conversation about weekend plans and whose turn it was to organize the next staff meeting. Mary was complaining about her husband leaving dishes in the sink. Linda was excited about her daughter's upcoming dance recital. Sarah nodded and made appropriate comments, but she was thinking about her SEAL teammates. Were they still out there, still serving? Had any of them made it back safely from their last deployment? She had cut all contact when she left that life behind, partly for security reasons and partly because maintaining those connections made it too hard to move forward. Her phone buzzed against the table. A text from her landlord about a rent increase. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. But the sound made her heart rate spike for just a second, the way it always did when she wasn't expecting contact. Even after all these years, part of her was still waiting for that call, the one that would pull her back into the world she had left behind. The afternoon brought parent-teacher conferences. Sarah met with mothers and fathers who worried about their children's grades and social development. She reassured them, offered strategies, and smiled warmly while discussing reading levels and playground behavior. None of them could have imagined that she had once briefed generals and coordinated with international intelligence agencies. Mrs. Patterson, Tommy's mother, leaned forward with concern. I worry about him being too aggressive sometimes. He plays these war games and talks about fighting bad guys. Is that normal? Sarah chose her words carefully. Children often work through complex ideas through play. As long as he's not hurting others, it's probably just his way of understanding the world around him. Maybe you could channel that interest into something constructive, like learning about history or geography. What she didn't say was that Tommy's instincts weren't wrong. There really were bad guys out there, and someone really did need to fight them. She had spent years of her life doing exactly that, protecting people like Mrs. Patterson and Tommy from threats they would never even know existed. After the last parent left, Sarah sat alone in her classroom, grading papers by the light of her desk lamp. The school was quiet now, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of the janitor's cart rolling down the hallway. She picked up Jessica's essay about what she wanted to be when she grew up. The little girl had written about becoming a teacher, just like Mrs. Martinez, because teachers help people learn and make the world better. Sarah smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. If only Jessica knew the other ways someone could serve their country and protect others. Sometimes Sarah wondered if she had made the right choice. The transition from military to civilian life had been harder than any mission she had ever completed. Learning to sleep through the night without jumping at every sound. Getting used to problems that couldn't be solved with precision planning and tactical execution. Adapting to a world where the stakes felt simultaneously much lower and somehow more personal. But watching her students grow and learn, seeing them develop confidence and curiosity, gave her a different kind of satisfaction. She was still serving her country, just in a different way. Instead of eliminating threats, she was building the next generation of citizens. As she packed up her things to head home, Sarah caught her reflection in the dark window. The fluorescent lights turned the glass into a mirror, and for a moment, she saw both versions of herself superimposed. The teacher and the warrior. The protector and the educator. Her small apartment was a 15-minute drive from the school, in a quiet neighborhood where the biggest excitement was usually someone's dog getting loose or a minor fender bender at the four-way stop. Sarah had chosen it specifically for its normalcy. No military housing, no gates or security checks, just regular people living regular lives. She made herself dinner, grilled chicken, and vegetables while watching the evening news. The anchor was reporting on tensions in the Middle East, and Sarah found herself analyzing the situation with old instincts. She could read between the lines of the sanitized news reports, understanding the real implications in a way that most civilians couldn't. Her phone rang as she was washing dishes. The number was local, probably a telemarketer, but she answered anyway. Hello, is this Sarah Martinez? The voice was professional, official. Yes, who's calling? Ma'am, this is Sergeant Williams with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. We're calling because your emergency contact information came up in our system, and we wanted to verify some details. Sarah's blood turned cold. Her emergency contact information shouldn't exist anywhere in any system. She had been extremely careful about that. I'm sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I'm not sure what you're referring to. It's regarding a background check for volunteer work at the elementary school. Standard procedure, nothing to worry about. Could you confirm your previous address and employment history? Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by irritation at her own paranoia. Of course, sorry. I thought you meant something else. But as she provided the information she had carefully constructed years ago, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The questions were too specific, too detailed for a simple volunteer background check. And why would they call at 8 o'clock at night? After she hung up, she stood in her kitchen, analyzing the conversation like she had once analyzed intelligence reports. The caller had known her name and had mentioned the school, but something about his voice bothered her. Too smooth, too practiced. She walked to her bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of her dresser. Underneath sweaters and winter clothes was a small metal box, locked and hidden. Inside were the only remainders of her old life: an encrypted phone, a passport under her real name, and a single business card with nothing but a phone number written on it. Sarah stared at the items for a long moment, then closed the box and put it back. She was probably being paranoid. 12 years of military training and 5 years of looking over her shoulder had made her see threats where none existed. Tomorrow she would go back to teaching fractions and reading comprehension, and tonight's phone call would fade into just another minor anxiety. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Sarah couldn't quite convince herself that everything was normal. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice was whispering that her carefully constructed new life might be more fragile than she had believed. The last thing she thought before drifting off to sleep was a memory from her SEAL training. Her instructor's voice, gruff and certain: "Trust your instincts, Chun. They'll keep you alive when everything else fails." Outside her window, a car drove slowly down her quiet street, its headlights sweeping across her bedroom wall before disappearing into the night. The next morning started like any other Wednesday, except Sarah woke up 10 minutes before her alarm, which never happened. Her internal clock was still calibrated to military precision, even after all these years, but lately she had been sleeping deeper, more peacefully. The fact that she was awake and alert before dawn felt like her subconscious tried to tell her something. She went through her morning routine, but found herself checking the locks on her doors and windows, something she hadn't done in months. The phone call from the night before kept replaying in her mind. The more she thought about it, the more wrong it felt. At school, Sarah tried to focus on her students, but she caught herself scanning the parking lot through her classroom window more than usual. During math time, when the kids were working quietly on their worksheets, she noticed a man in a dark suit standing near the main office. He didn't look like a parent or a substitute teacher. He looked military. "Mrs. Martinez?" Tommy raised his hand, pulling her attention back to the classroom. "I can't figure out this word problem." Sarah walked over to help him, but kept glancing toward the window. The man was gone. During her lunch break, she decided to walk past the main office just to see if anyone was asking questions about her. Janet was at her desk, typing on her computer, looking completely normal. "Hey, Janet," Sarah said casually. "I thought I saw someone earlier who looked official. Everything okay?" Janet looked up with a confused expression. "Official how? We had a delivery guy this morning, and Mrs. Henderson's husband stopped by, but nothing unusual." "Why?" "Oh, probably nothing. Just thought I recognized someone." Sarah forced a smile and headed back to her classroom, feeling foolish but not entirely convinced. The rest of the day passed normally, except for the black sedan that was parked across from the school when she left. It wasn't there when she arrived that morning, and it looked too expensive and too clean for the neighborhood. Sarah made a mental note of the license plate and took a slightly different route home, checking her mirrors the entire time. That evening, she called the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department directly. "Hi, this is Sarah Martinez. I received a call last night from one of your officers about a background check, and I wanted to follow up." "Hold on. Let me transfer you to the right department," the dispatcher said. After being transferred twice, Sarah finally reached someone who could help her. "Ma'am, we don't have any record of anyone calling you last night. We also don't handle background checks for school volunteers. Those go through a different agency entirely." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Are you sure?" The officer said his name was Sergeant Williams. "We don't have any Sergeant Williams in our department, ma'am. Are you sure it was us who called you?" After hanging up, Sarah sat in her living room, her teacher persona completely stripped away. She was thinking like a SEAL again, analyzing threats and calculating options. Someone had called her, pretending to be law enforcement, asking questions about her background. Someone who knew where she worked and had her phone number. She retrieved the metal box from her bedroom drawer and stared at the contents. The encrypted phone hadn't been turned on in 3 years. The passport was still valid, but using it would mean completely abandoning the life she had built. The business card belonged to Commander Rodriguez, her former commanding officer, who had promised that if she ever needed help, all she had to do was call. Sarah had never intended to make that call. She spent the rest of the evening researching online, using skills she had learned in intelligence training to dig deeper than most people knew how to look. The black sedan's license plate came back to a rental car company. The rental was paid for with a corporate credit card linked to a company that didn't seem to exist beyond a basic website and a P.O. box. Someone was definitely watching her. The question was who and why now? Sarah had been careful to cover her tracks when she left the military. She had followed all the proper procedures, debriefed thoroughly, and been cleared for civilian life. Her service record was classified, but not unusual for someone with her background. She hadn't taken any state secrets with her or left any loose ends. Unless something had changed. The next morning, Thursday, Sarah arrived at school early and parked in a different spot where she could watch the main entrance. She saw the black sedan again, this time with 2 men inside. They weren't trying very hard to hide, which meant either they were sloppy or they wanted her to know they were there. During her planning period, Sarah used the school computer to check the news, looking for anything that might explain why someone would be interested in her after all these years. She found what she was looking for in a small article buried on the 3rd page of an international news website. A former Navy SEAL had been killed in what appeared to be a home invasion in Virginia. But Sarah recognized the name Lieutenant Commander James Walsh, one of her former teammates. The article mentioned that nothing was stolen from his house, and police were investigating the possibility that it wasn't a random crime. Sarah's hands were shaking as she scrolled through more news sites. 3 more former SEALs had died in the past 6 months. Car accident in California. Apparent suicide in Texas. Drowning accident in Florida. None of the deaths made national news, and if you weren't looking for a pattern, you wouldn't see one. But Sarah was looking now, and the pattern was clear. Someone was systematically targeting members of her old unit. She spent the rest of the school day teaching fractions and helping with a reading comprehension worksheet about dolphins, but her mind was elsewhere, calculating survival probabilities and escape routes. When the final bell rang and her students filed out with their usual chaos of backpacks and forgotten homework, Sarah knew she had to make a decision. That night, she turned on the encrypted phone for the first time in 3 years. It took several minutes to power up and connect to a secure network. She had 17 missed messages, all from the same number. Commander Rodriguez. The messages started 8 months ago. Chun, need to talk. Call me. 6 months ago. Sarah, this is urgent. People from our unit are in danger. From months ago. Damn it, Sarah, I know you're out there. Check the news. Walsh is dead. 2 months ago. They're getting closer to finding everyone. You need to disappear now. 1 month ago. If you get this message, don't go home. Don't go to work. Get somewhere public and call me immediately. The most recent message was from yesterday. They found your address. You have maybe 24 hours before they make their move. Trust no one except me. Sarah stared at the phone, her teacher life, and her SEAL training warring in her mind. Rodriguez had been the best commanding officer she had ever served under. If he said she was in danger, she was in danger. But calling him would mean admitting that her 5 years of careful civilian life had been an illusion. She looked around her apartment, at the grade book on her coffee table, and the pictures of her students on her refrigerator. 26 kids who would come to school tomorrow expecting their teacher to be there, ready with spelling words and math problems and the patient encouragement they had come to depend on. The phone buzzed in her hand. A new message from Rodriguez. Sarah, I know this is hard, but If you don't call me in the next hour, I'm coming to get you myself. These people killed Walsh, Martinez, Johnson, and Kim. You're next on the list. Martinez. She had taken his name when she created her new identity, not realizing it belonged to one of her fallen teammates. The coincidence felt like a sign, or maybe a warning she had been too naive to see. Sarah walked to her bedroom window and looked out at the street. The black sedan was parked 3 houses down, and she could see the glow of cigarette ember in the darkness. They weren't even pretending to hide anymore. She had 2 choices: call Rodriguez and dive back into a world she had spent 5 years trying to escape, or ignore the warning and hope that her quiet teacher life would somehow protect her. But as she stood at the window, watching the men who were watching her, Sarah realized she had been fooling herself. She was never going to be just a teacher. She was a Navy SEAL who happened to be teaching 4th grade, and someone had figured that out. The question wasn't whether she would go back to her old life. The question was whether she would survive long enough to have that choice. Sarah picked up the encrypted phone and dialed Rodriguez's number. It rang once. Chun. His voice was exactly the same, gruff and commanding and somehow reassuring. It's me. Thank God. Are you secure? No. They're outside my building right now. Listen carefully. Do you still have your emergency kit? Sarah looked at the metal box, still open on her bed. Yes. Take only what you can carry in a small bag. Leave through your building's back exit in exactly 12 minutes. There's a 24-hour laundromat 3 blocks north of you. Wait there. I'll have someone pick you up in 30 minutes. Rodriguez, what the hell is going on? Who's killing our people? It's complicated. I'll explain everything once you're safe. But, Sarah, these aren't amateurs. They're professionals, and they've been planning this for months. If you hesitate, if you try to pack too much or say goodbye to anyone, you won't make it out alive. Sarah looked around her apartment one more time. At the framed photo of her students from the first day of school. At the coffee mug Tommy had made her in art class. At the carefully constructed normal life she was about to abandon. 12 minutes, Rodriguez repeated. Can you do this? Sarah Chun had completed missions in hostile territory with less preparation and higher stakes. She had trusted Rodriguez with her life dozens of times, and he had never let her down. But Sarah Martinez, the 4th grade teacher, had never had to disappear in the middle of the night to save her own life. I'll be there, she said, and meant it. After ending the call, she moved quickly and efficiently, her muscle memory taking over. Essential documents went into a waterproof bag, a change of clothes, cash, and basic supplies, the encrypted phone, and her real passport. Everything else, including the life she had built and the students who were counting on her, would have to be left behind. As she prepared to leave her apartment for the last time, Sarah caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't Mrs. Martinez anymore. She was Petty Officer First Class Sarah Chun, and she was going back to war. The back exit of Sarah's apartment building led to an alley that connected to a residential street. She had mapped out this route years ago, back when she first moved in, but had hoped never to use it. Now, carrying only a small backpack and moving in the shadows, she felt like herself again for the first time in 5 years. The men watching the front of her building wouldn't realize she was gone for at least another hour, assuming they weren't monitoring the back exit. Sarah had to assume they were professionals, which meant they probably had the building surrounded, but she also had to hope they had underestimated her. She moved through the neighborhood using techniques she hadn't practiced since leaving the service, staying close to buildings, avoiding streetlights, and checking behind her every few steps. The laundromat was exactly where Rodriguez had said it would be, a brightly lit island in a mostly sleeping neighborhood. Sarah slipped inside and chose a washing machine in the back corner where she could watch both the entrance and the street. She fed quarters into the machine and added some clothes from her backpack, playing the role of someone doing late-night laundry. The familiar weight of her old training settled over her like putting on a uniform she had forgotten she owned. Exactly 30 minutes later, a woman in her 50s walked into the laundromat. She was small and unremarkable, wearing scrubs like she was coming off a late shift at the hospital. But Sarah noticed the way she moved, the way her eyes swept the room, and the way she positioned herself near the exit. "Sarah Martinez?" the woman asked quietly. "Depends who's asking. Rodriguez sent me. I'm Agent Kim. We need to go now." Sarah followed Agent Kim to a beat-up Honda Civic that looked like it belonged to an overworked nurse. As they drove through the sleeping city, Kim explained the basics. "Your commander is at a safe house about 2 hours from here. We've been tracking the people who are hunting your unit for the past year. They call themselves the Crimson Group, and they're very good at what they do." "Which is what, exactly?" "Eliminating threats to their operation. Your old unit disrupted something big during your last deployment, and now they're tying up loose ends." Sarah tried to remember anything from her final missions that would warrant this kind of response. Her unit had completed dozens of operations during that deployment, most of them routine by SEAL standards. "What operation?" "We did a lot of things over there. Rodriguez will have all the details." "But, Sarah, you need to understand something. These people have been planning this for 3 years. They know everything about your new life, your job, your students, even your grocery store preferences. They've been watching you for months, waiting for the right moment." The thought of these killers knowing about her students made Sarah's blood run cold. "Are the kids in danger?" "No. This is about eliminating former SEALs, not civilians. But anyone who gets too close to you becomes a potential casualty." They drove in silence for a while, through suburbs and then rural farmland. Sarah watched the side mirrors, but didn't see any signs of pursuit. Kim was good at counter-surveillance, taking random turns and doubling back on roads to make sure they weren't being followed. "Can I ask you something?" Kim said after they had been driving for over an hour. "Sure. How did you do it? How did you just walk away from all of this and become a normal person?" Sarah thought about the question. "I don't think I ever really became normal. I just got really good at pretending." The safe house was a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by cornfields and approached by a long gravel driveway. Sarah could see defensive positions and clear fields of fire from multiple angles. Whoever had chosen this location understood military tactics. Rodriguez was waiting on the porch as they pulled up. He looked older than Sarah remembered, with gray hair and new lines around his eyes, but his posture was still straight and commanding. When he saw her get out of the car, he smiled for the first time since she had known him. "Chun, good to see you're still in one piece. For now, Kim says you have answers. Ido, come inside." The farmhouse had been turned into a tactical operations center. Maps covered the walls, computers hummed on every available surface, and Sarah could see surveillance equipment monitoring the approaches to the house. 3 other people were working at various stations, all of them with the bearing and alertness of special operations personnel. Rodriguez led her to a conference room where files and photographs were spread across a large table. Sarah recognized some of the faces in the photos, her former teammates, the ones who were now dead. "Sit down, Sarah. This is going to take a while." Rodriguez opened a thick folder and pulled out satellite photos from Afghanistan. "Remember Operation Desert Storm, your last mission before you left the service?" Sarah nodded. It had been a routine raid on a suspected Taliban compound, except they had found something unexpected. "The target wasn't Taliban," Rodriguez continued. "It was a meeting between Taliban leaders and representatives from a private military contractor called Meridian Solutions. Your team interrupted an arms deal worth $200 million. I remember the mission, but we didn't find any weapons. Just some dead Taliban and a lot of computers. The weapons were already gone, but those computers contained financial records and communication logs that exposed a much bigger operation. Meridian Solutions was selling American military equipment to terrorist organizations, using profits to fund private armies in Africa and South America." Rodriguez pulled out more documents showing bank transfers and communication intercepts. "Your team unknowingly handed us evidence of one of the largest illegal arms operations in history. We used that intelligence to shut down Meridian Solutions and arrest over 30 people, including some very high-ranking military officials." Sarah studied the documents, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't realized she was part of. But that was 5 years ago. Why come after us now? Because Meridian's leadership just got out of prison, and they've spent the last 3 years planning their comeback. They blame your unit for destroying their empire, and they want revenge before they rebuild their operation. So they created the Crimson Group to hunt down everyone who was on that mission. Exactly. They've made it look like accidents and random crimes, but they're working through a list. You were number 7. Sarah felt a chill as she realized how close she had come to being another accident. How many of us are left? Out of the 12-person team, 4. You, me, Lieutenant Jackson, and Sergeant Torres. Everyone else is dead. The weight of that information settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. 8 of her former teammates were gone, killed by people seeking revenge for a mission they had completed while serving their country. Where are Jackson and Torres? Safe for now. Jackson is in protective custody with the FBI. Torres went underground completely. We haven't been able to contact him for 6 months, but we haven't found a body either, so we're assuming he's still alive. Rodriguez closed the folder and looked directly at Sarah. Here's the situation. The FBI wants to use you as bait to draw out the Crimson Group. They think if we let them get close to you, we can capture the leadership and end this thing. And if something goes wrong, I'm dead. Yes. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark cornfields. Somewhere out there, people were still hunting her, still planning her death. But somewhere else, there were 26 fourth graders who would show up to school tomorrow, expecting their teacher to be there. What if I just disappeared? New identity, different country, complete separation from everything. You could try. But, Sarah, these people are very good at finding people who don't want to be found. And they're patient. They've been planning this for 3 years. They'll keep looking until they find you. Sarah turned back to Rodriguez. And if I help with this FBI operation, if it works, the threat ends permanently. If it doesn't work, I'm still dead, but maybe Jackson and Torres survive. Rodriguez nodded grimly. That's about the size of it. Sarah thought about her students again, about Tommy and Jessica and Emma and all the others. What would happen to them if she just vanished? How would they understand why their teacher had abandoned them? But what would happen if she went back and these killers decided to use her students as leverage? There's something else, Rodriguez said quietly. The reason they found you after all these years. Someone inside the system has been helping them. Someone with access to classified records and witness protection databases. You think there's a mole. I know there's a mole. That's why we can't trust normal FBI channels. This whole operation has to be off the books, using only people we know personally. Sarah sat back down at the conference table and looked at the photographs of her dead teammates one more time. These were good people who had served their country with honor, and they had been murdered by criminals seeking revenge. If I do this, what's the plan? Rodriguez smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. We make you visible again. Draw them out into the open where we can take them down. Using me as bait. Using you as bait. Sarah thought about the choice she was facing. Go back to her teaching job and put innocent children at risk, disappear forever, and spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, or stand and fight the people who had killed her friends. When she put it that way, there really wasn't a choice at all. All right, she said. Tell me what you need me to do. Rodriguez opened another folder, this one containing operational plans and tactical scenarios. First, we need to talk about how this is going to work. And, Sarah, once we start this, there's no going back. Your life as Sarah Martinez, 4th grade teacher, is over either way. Sarah nodded, understanding the finality of what she was agreeing to. But as she looked at the faces of her dead teammates, she knew that some things were worth the risk. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The plan was both simple and terrifying. Sarah would return to her normal routine, acting as if nothing had happened, while Rodriguez's team monitored her from a distance. The idea was to make the Crimson Group believe they still had the element of surprise, drawing them into making their move when and where Rodriguez's people could intercept them. The key is making this look natural, Rodriguez explained as they went over the details. You go back to teaching, but you'll be wearing a wire and carrying a tracking device. We'll have eyes on you 24 hours a day, but you won't be able to see us. Sarah studied the floor plans of her school that someone had already obtained. What about my students? If something goes wrong, the operation will happen away from the school. We'll make sure they try to take you to your apartment or during your commute. Kids will never be in danger. How can you guarantee that? Rodriguez's expression was grim. Because we're going to make it easier for them to get you somewhere else. We'll create opportunities and vulnerabilities that will be too tempting to pass up. Agent Kim spread out surveillance photos on the table. We've identified 3 members of the Crimson Group who are definitely in the area. Marcus Volkov, former Spetsnaz, specializes in making deaths look accidental. Elena Santos, ex-CIA, handles intelligence and logistics. And David Murphy, former Marine sniper, who probably handles the actual killing when accidents aren't practical. Sarah studied the faces. They looked like ordinary people, the kind you would pass on the street without a second thought. How long have they been watching me? Based on surveillance footage we've recovered, at least 2 months. Maybe longer. 2 months. Sarah thought about all the times she had felt like someone was watching her, all the moments she had dismissed as paranoia. Her instincts had been right, but she had ignored them because she wanted so badly to believe in her normal life. When do we start? Monday morning. You'll call in sick today and tomorrow, claiming food poisoning. That gives us time to set up our surveillance and position our people. Monday, you go back to school like nothing happened. Rodriguez handed her a small device that looked like a hearing aid. This goes in your ear. We'll be able to hear everything and communicate with you if necessary. The tracking device looks like a fitness watch. Sarah took the equipment, feeling the weight of what she was committing to. And if they don't take the bait, they will. These people have been planning your death for months. They're not going to walk away because you disappeared for a few days. The next 2 days are the longest of Sarah's life. She stayed at the safe house, going over the plan repeatedly and trying to prepare mentally for what was coming. Rodriguez's team briefed her on each member of the Crimson Group, their tactics, and their probable approach. On Sunday evening, she was driven back to her apartment building. The black sedan was gone, but Sarah knew that didn't mean anything. If the Crimson Group was as professional as Rodriguez believed, they would have moved to less obvious surveillance methods. Her apartment looked exactly as she had left it, but somehow felt different. Knowing that hostile eyes had been watching her every move for months changed the way she saw everything. The window she had always loved for its morning light now felt like a security vulnerability. The routine she had found so comforting now seemed like predictable behavior that could get her killed. Sarah spent Sunday night grading papers and preparing lesson plans, just as she would have any other weekend. But every sound in the hallway made her heart rate spike, and she found herself checking the locks every hour. Monday morning came too soon and not soon enough. Sarah dressed carefully in clothes that would look normal, but allow her to move quickly if necessary. She put in the earpiece and strapped on the tracking device, then looked at herself in the mirror one last time. Testing, she said quietly. Rodriguez's voice came through clearly in her ear. We hear you, Chun. You've got 3 cars in position and 2 agents in the school. You're going to be fine. The drive to school felt surreal. Sarah followed her normal route, stopped at the same coffee shop she always visited, and smiled at the barista who knew her regular order. But through the earpiece, she could hear Rodriguez's team providing constant updates. Target is mobile, heading east on Maple Street. Copy that. Overwatch 2 has visual. Possible surveillance vehicle, blue Toyota, maintaining distance. Sarah forced herself to act naturally, even though every instinct was screaming at her to run. When she pulled into the school parking lot, she saw several vehicles that she didn't recognize, but any one of them could have been a parent or a substitute teacher. Made it to school, she said quietly as she gathered her things. Roger, we're in position. Remember, act normal. Teacher classes. We'll handle everything else. The morning was almost a relief. Being surrounded by her students and Focusing on their needs helped calm Sarah's nerves. Tommy had forgotten his homework again. Jessica was excited about a loose tooth, and Emma wanted to show everyone the butterfly she had drawn over the weekend. For a few hours, Sarah was able to be Mrs. Martinez again, the teacher who cared more about helping children learn than about surveillance and counter-surveillance. But the earpiece kept reminding her that this was all temporary. Possible contact, came Rodriguez's voice during lunch. White van, 2 occupants, parked across from the school for the past hour. Sarah continued eating her sandwich and grading papers, but her muscles were tensed and ready to move. Through her classroom window, she could see the white van Rodriguez was talking about. They're just watching for now, Rodriguez continued. No immediate threat. Continue normal routine. The afternoon passed slowly. Sarah taught a science lesson about magnets, helped with a math worksheet, and read a story about a mouse who learned to be brave. But part of her mind was constantly analyzing her surroundings, looking for threats and escape routes. When the final bell rang and her students left for the day, Sarah felt simultaneously relieved and more vulnerable. The children had been an unconscious shield, making it unlikely that anything would happen while they were around. Now she was more isolated, more exposed. Leaving school now, she said quietly as she walked her car. Copy. We have eyes on you. White van is gone, but we've got a different vehicle that might be following. Gray sedan, 2 cars behind you. Sarah drove her normal route home, checking her mirrors but trying not to be obvious about it. The gray sedan stayed with her for several blocks, then turned off. Either they were being careful or Rodriguez's team was being paranoid. Her apartment building looked normal, but Sarah had learned not to trust appearances. She parked in her usual spot and walked to the entrance, keys ready, moving at her normal pace despite every instinct telling her to hurry. Clear so far, Rodriguez's voice said in her ear. But stay alert. If I'm going to make a move, tonight would be a good time. Sarah spent the evening grading papers and preparing for the next day's lessons, just as she would have any other Monday night. But she was also listening for sounds in the hallway and watching the street from her window. At 9:30, her doorbell rang. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She never had visitors, especially not on weeknight evenings. Rodriguez, she whispered, someone's at my door. We see it. 2 people, 1 male, 1 female. They look official, possibly law enforcement. But we didn't send anyone. The doorbell rang again, followed by a polite knock. Ms. Martinez, came a voice through the door. This is Detective Phillips with the Jefferson County Police Department. We'd like to ask you some questions about a former student. Sarah moved closer to the door, but didn't open it. Can I see some identification? 2 badges were held up to the peephole. They looked real, but Sarah had learned not to trust anything that looked normal. Ms. Martinez, we're investigating a case involving Tommy Patterson, one of your students. His mother said you might have some information that could help us. Sarah's heart stopped. Tommy was one of her favorite students, and his mother was a sweet woman who was already worried about her son's behavior. If something had happened to Tommy. But Rodriguez's voice was sharp in her ear. Don't open the door. This is not legitimate. We checked with local police 20 minutes ago. No investigation involving any of your students. I'm sorry, Sarah called through the door, but I can't open the door right now. If you're really police officers, you can contact me through the school administration tomorrow. MS. Martinez, this is urgent. Tommy's mother specifically asked us to speak with you tonight. Sarah moved away from the door, her mind racing. These people knew about Tommy, knew his mother's concerns, knew exactly which emotional buttons to push to make her open the door. They had been watching her for months, learning about her relationships with her students. Ms. Martinez, the voice was becoming more insistent. We can hear you in there. Please open the door. Rodriguez, Sarah whispered. How fast can your people get here? 2 minutes. Maybe less. Just keep them talking and don't open that door. But Sarah could hear something that Rodriguez couldn't. The sound of someone working on the lock. These people weren't going to wait for her to open the door voluntarily. Ms. Martinez, we're coming in. We have a warrant. Sarah grabbed her emergency bag and moved toward the back of her apartment. The lock clicked, and she heard her front door open. Kitchen window, she whispered to Rodriguez. I'm going out the kitchen window. Sarah had practiced this route dozens of times in her mind, but never thought she would actually use it. The kitchen window led to a fire escape that connected to the alley behind her building. She pushed the window open and swung her leg over the sill just as she heard footsteps entering her apartment. She's running, came a shout from behind her. Back exit, back exit. Sarah dropped down the fire escape and hit the alley running. Behind her, she could hear more footsteps and voices, but Rodriguez's voice in her ear was calm and reassuring. We got you, Chun. Keep heading north. Blue sedan waiting at the corner of 5th and Main. Sarah ran through the alley, staying in the shadows, using every bit of urban evasion training she had ever learned. Behind her, she could hear pursuit, but it was falling behind. Whatever else the Crimson Group was, they weren't as fast as a Navy SEAL who was running for her life. She reached the corner of 5th and Main just as a blue sedan pulled up. Agent Kim was behind the wheel. Get in. Sarah dove into the passenger seat as Kim accelerated away from the curb. In the side mirror, she could see two figures emerging from the alley, but they were too far behind to matter. Rodriguez, Sarah said, breathing hard. Are your people okay? Everyone's fine. We got them, Chun. All 3 of them. It's over. Sarah slumped back in her seat, the adrenaline slowly leaving her system. Just like that. Just like that. They walked right into our trap. We've got them dead to rights on attempted kidnapping, murder conspiracy, and about 10 other charges. The Crimson Group is finished. As Kim drove through the city, taking random turns to make sure they weren't being followed, Sarah tried to process what had just happened. 3 months ago, she had been a 4th-grade teacher whose biggest worry was parent-teacher conferences. Tonight, she had just escaped a kidnapping attempt by professional killers. So what happens now? She asked. Rodriguez's voice came through the earpiece, and for the first time since she had known him, he sounded uncertain. That's up to you, Chun. The threat is over, but your cover is blown. You can't go back to being Sarah Martinez. Sarah looked out the window at the city lights, thinking about her students who would show up to school tomorrow, expecting their teacher to be there. Thinking about lesson plans and spelling tests and the small daily victories of helping children learn. Can I at least say goodbye? There was a long pause before Rodriguez answered. We'll figure something out. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood outside Jefferson Elementary School one last time. She was wearing a visitor's badge and had signed in under her real name, Sarah Chun, listed as a family friend of Mrs. Martinez. The irony wasn't lost on her. Rodriguez had worked with the FBI and the school district to create a cover story that would protect both Sarah's identity and the children's sense of security. Mrs. Martinez had been called away on a family emergency and wouldn't be returning to school. Miss Chin would be taking over the class for the rest of the year. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best they could do. Sarah walked down the familiar hallway, past the trophy case where she had seen her reflection that first day when everything started to unravel. The building looked exactly the same, but she felt like a completely different person. She wasn't pretending to be someone else anymore. She was Sarah Chun, former Navy SEAL, who happened to be very good at teaching children. Principal Johnson met her at the classroom door. Miss Chun, the children are very excited to meet you. We've explained that Mrs. Martinez had to leave suddenly due to a family situation, but that she specifically recommended you to take her place. Sarah nodded, adjusting the small recording device in her pocket. She had asked Rodriguez for one favor, the chance to record a message for her students, explaining as much as she safely could about why she had to leave. It wouldn't be enough, but it was something. Mrs. Martinez left very detailed lesson plans and notes about each student. The principal continued. She wanted to make sure the transition would be as smooth as possible. Of course she had. Sarah had spent most of the past 3 weeks writing those lesson plans, pouring everything she knew about her students into notes that would help whoever replaced her. She had included details about Tommy's reading struggles and the strategies that worked best for him. She had noted Jessica's love of science experiments and Emma's dreams of being a soldier someday. The principal opened the classroom door, and 26 familiar faces looked up expectantly. Sarah's heart broke a little as she saw their expressions. Hopeful, but confused, missing their regular teacher, but trying to be polite to the stranger who was replacing her. Class, Principal Johnson announced, "This is Miss Chun. She's going to be your teacher for the rest of the year." Tommy raised his hand immediately. "Where's Mrs. Martinez? Is she coming back?" Sarah had practiced this answer, but it was still hard to say. Mrs. Martinez had to help her family with something very important. She wanted me to tell you that she misses you very much and that she's proud of how hard you've all been working. But she didn't even say goodbye, Emma said, and Sarah could hear the hurt in her voice. Sometimes grown-ups have to leave very quickly when their families need help, Sarah explained gently. But Mrs. Martinez left me letters for each of you, and she made me promise to tell you how special you are to her. That part was true. Sarah had written individual letters to each student, staying in character as Mrs. Martinez, but putting her real feelings into every word. She had told Tommy that she believed in him and knew he would become a great reader. She had encouraged Jessica to keep asking questions and never stop being curious about the world. She had told Emma that girls could indeed be soldiers and that the most important thing was to be brave and kind. The morning passed easier than Sarah had expected. The lesson plans she had left for herself were detailed and familiar, and the children gradually warmed up to Miss Chun, even though they clearly missed Mrs. Martinez. By lunchtime, the classroom felt almost normal again. During the children's lunch period, Sarah sat alone in the classroom she had thought about every day for the past 3 weeks. She pulled out the recording device and started speaking quietly. "Hi, everyone. This is Mrs. Martinez. I know you're confused about why I had to leave so suddenly, and I wish I could explain everything to you. The truth is, sometimes adults have complicated lives that children shouldn't have to worry about. What I want you to know is that teaching you was the best job I ever had." She paused, thinking about how to explain without lying or saying too much. "Before I became your teacher, I had a different job where I had to travel far away and help protect people. I thought that job was finished, but sometimes the past catches up with you in ways you don't expect. I had to leave quickly to keep you safe, because the most important thing to me is that you're okay." Sarah looked around the classroom at the artwork on the walls and the books on the shelves, trying to memorize every detail. "I want each of you to remember that you're capable of amazing things. Tommy, keep practicing your reading. You're getting better every day, and I know you're going to love all the stories you'll discover. Jessica, never stop asking questions. The world needs people who are curious about how things work. Emma, you can be anything you want to be, including a soldier if that's what you choose. Be brave, be kind, and take care of each other." The recording felt inadequate, but it was all she could give them. When the children returned from lunch, Sarah threw herself into the afternoon lessons. Science time became an exploration of different types of magnets, with hands-on experiments that got everyone excited. Math time involved word problems about adventures and discoveries. Reading time featured a story about a person who had to leave home, but never forgot the people they loved. As the school day ended and the children gathered their backpacks and homework folders, Emma approached Sarah's desk. "Miss Chun, will you be here tomorrow?" "Yes, Emma. I'll be here." "Good." Mrs. Martinez was nice, but I think you're nice too. After the last child left, Sarah sat alone in the empty classroom for a few minutes. Tomorrow she would start fresh with these children, building new relationships and new memories. She would still be teaching, still helping them learn and grow, but she would be doing it as herself instead of as someone else. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. "How did it go?" "Better than expected," she replied. "I think this might work." Over the following weeks, Sarah settled into her new role. She was more cautious now, more aware of her surroundings, but she was also more authentic. She told the children stories about traveling to different countries, carefully editing out the military details. She taught them about geography using places she had actually visited. She helped them understand that people could have different jobs throughout their lives and that sometimes experiences that seemed very different actually prepared you for new challenges. The children gradually stopped asking about Mrs. Martinez, though Sarah knew they hadn't forgotten her. Emma still talked about wanting to be a soldier, and Sarah was able to give her encouragement that came from real experience. Tommy's reading improved steadily, and Sarah felt the same pride in his progress that she had felt as Mrs. Martinez. Jessica's endless questions reminded Sarah why she had fallen in love with teaching in the first place. 3 months in her new role, Sarah received a call from Rodriguez. "We got some good news, Chun. The FBI traced the Crimson Group's funding back to its source. They've arrested 12 more people, including the original Meridian Solutions leadership. The threat is completely eliminated. And Jackson and Torres? Safe. Jackson's coming out of protective custody next week. We found Torres in Costa Rica, running a surf shop and dating a marine biologist. He says he's never been happier." Sarah laughed, imagining the serious, intense sergeant she had known learning to surf and falling in love with a scientist. "What about you?" Rodriguez asked. "Are you happy?" Sarah looked around her classroom at the student artwork covering the walls and the carefully organized learning center she had created. "I am. This is who I'm supposed to be." "Good, because I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." The Department of Education wants to create a new program for schools in military communities. Teachers who understand military families and can help children deal with deployment stress and family separation. They need someone with both military experience and proven teaching skills. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a career, a chance to use both sides of your background to help kids who need it. No more hiding, no more pretending. Just Sarah Chun, former Navy SEAL and current teacher, doing what she does best." Sarah thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Where do I sign up?" 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of a new classroom in a school near a major military base. The children in her class were military kids, many of them dealing with deployed parents and frequent moves. They understood things that civilian children couldn't, and they needed a teacher who understood their unique challenges. On the first day of school, a little girl with serious eyes raised her hand. "Miss Chun, my daddy is deployed right now. He's a Navy SEAL. Do you know what that means?" Sarah smiled, remembering another little girl who had once asked questions about women in the military. "Yes, I do know what that means. And I know that your daddy is very brave and very proud of you." "How do you know?" "Because," Sarah said, "I used to be a Navy SEAL too." The classroom erupted in excited whispers and questions. For the first time in years, Sarah didn't have to hide who she was or pretend to be someone else. She was exactly where she belonged, protecting and teaching children, using all of her skills and all of her experience to help them grow into the people they were meant to become. That evening, Sarah called Rodriguez to report on her first day. "How did it go, Chun?" "Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Any regrets about giving up the quiet civilian life?" Sarah thought about her old apartment, her careful routines, and the exhausting effort of maintaining a false identity. "None at all. I spent 5 years pretending to be normal. It turns out I'm much happier being extraordinary." As she hung up the phone, Sarah looked at the lesson plans spread across her kitchen table. Tomorrow, she would teach fractions and reading comprehension, help with playground conflicts, and answer a dozen questions about what it was like to be a female SEAL. She would use her tactical training to manage classroom chaos and her leadership experience to inspire children to believe in themselves. She had found her calling twice in one lifetime. First as a warrior protecting her country, and then as a teacher protecting the future. And for the first time since leaving the military, Sarah Chun was exactly who she was supposed to be,